Welcome back to the Noble Fury podcast. Today we're discussing March 8th, 2014, when Malaysian Airline Flight 370 disappeared into thin air, or someplace else. Wherever it went, it's unaccounted for to this day. One of the biggest mysteries in aviation history. Stir Amelia Earhart in there, but this was 239 people.
It's been over 10 years.
Yes, and on this, on the recent 10-year anniversary thereabouts, the Malaysian government has announced that they have rehired the same organization, Ocean Infinity, to dig in on where the plane is. I think I've got some really straightforward, simple information that I think sheds a lot of light on what really happened. I know you have some ideas and some different opinions on it.
For sure.
So who shoots first? You want to?
Well, so I just want to bring up some latest revelations. So there are, you mentioned Ocean Infinity. They've contracted with the Malaysian government to do a find for fee search.
$70 million.
That's correct. $70 million. And what they're going to do is go back and look at an area where they didn't investigate before. But if they don't find anything, then the Malaysian government does not have to pay the $70 million.
And let me mention quickly, right on topic, the area that they're proposing to investigate and search is about 5,000 square miles. Connecticut's 4,800 square miles, give or take. Now, the irony here that people, I think, it's simple to forget that they're not just looking at 5,000 square miles. They're looking for 5,000 square miles in the deepest part of the ocean. In essence, a crass analogy might be drive around the state of Connecticut in the dark, in the black dark, and bump into the airplane.
Yeah, it might be actually worse than that because extreme deep sea interrogations are kind of like finding things on the moon or Mars. It's probably easier. We've had more technological breakthroughs with spaceships and with lunar rovers and Martian rovers than we have with deep sea underwater investigations.
You're right. The logistics of a search at this level, at this depth in the ocean is sort of unprecedented in terms of complications.
It's because the pressures are so much greater there that
it's pitch black.
Well, it's pitch black. Lights work, but the pressures are so intense that most equipment fail.
Just getting there. Wait, it's not getting down there to search. Just getting to the search site and then commencing to search. Here's what I'm making this up, but I'm going to throw something at you quickly. Speaking of Ocean Infinity, I'm guessing at $70 million. I'm going to guess to search is $1 million a day. I don't have any idea. I'm pulling that number out of thin air.
Yeah.
Okay. If it's $1 million a day and I'm the CFO of Ocean Infinity, I'm searching for 30 days. I've spent $30 million. Our pay is $70 million. I'm searching for 45 days. Our pay is $70 million. We've spent $45 million. Where do they stop? Where there's a point of diminishing returns,
it's
right?
probably around $35 million.
This is what I was going to guess. Between 30 and 50 million.
Yeah. So
or days. I mean, if it's $1 million a day,
they're equivalent. Your analogy or your analysis involved $1 million per day. So 35 days and $35 million is the same.
I don't know what you think of the $1 million a day.
No, I think that's probably roughly right. I mean, although I think it's a lot of it's front end loaded. You have
Technology,
to spend you have to spend a lot of money on getting all of the ship rented for a certain length of time, getting all of the equipment either
you got personnel.
rented. You have to pay personnel. That's true, but you have to pay for fuel, food, and so there are a lot of things you have to spend money up front. So whether it's 30 days or 45 days, it may not actually matter because it may not come out to be exact. It may not be $1 million per day, even though you're setting that as the basis for the analysis. It may actually be cheaper than that over time.
I think the point of it is in the beginning when the plane went down, they looked for 4 months.
Yeah,
and I don't think I don't think Ocean Infinity has 4 months.
Right.
I could be wrong.
So in that same area, Cardiff University has a mathematics professor who.
This is a great.
This is a fascinating story.
It's crazy.
So
cool.
What he's done is he has some data from beacons that are all spread out all throughout the oceans. That search for
audio beacons, in essence, right?
That's right. But they're looking for pressure changes in the ocean, sound pressure changes in the ocean, and these beacons exist.
Sonar, in essence, sort of.
It's kind of a sonar,
Sure.
but they're designed to help enforce the arms treaties that many of the large nuclear power nations have with one another about testing protocols.
So the takeaway right there is this is the top level of technology.
These are super sophisticated beacons.
This is as good as it gets. Nobody's got a better variation on this.
Right. And so they have some data where a large sound was seemingly made about the right time when the plane would have crashed and so forth. And so right now what they're going to do is attempt to do some experiments where they put sound-making devices in the water where they think that the wreckage might be, not deep, but somewhat down. They're going to drop them on cables.
Are you saying,
and they're going to reproduce sounds. And they're going to see if those same beacons that detected that first sound, what the level of information those beacons generate. So in other words, if they can produce the same sound levels, they know they're in the right spot. So this is the experiment that this mathematician is going to conduct after. So I think it's going to be this spring is when they're going to set into this.
Yeah, it's interesting because to recreate the basic audio, right? If you're putting this thing like on a sound graph, you've got to hit right. The recreation is really critical. Because if the recreation is not similar, similar on a sound graph,
sound travels through water with certain known predictable patterns, and so these hydroacoustics is what this is called. Hydroacoustics, they're going to be able to reproduce the same hydroacoustics if they're in the same if they're in the vicinity or very close to where the plane presumably went down.
This is going to have to do with currents and tides and the depth.
It's deeper. It's deeper. So they drop these sensors in pretty deep into the water, and so it's going to be above the current
level. See, if it's too deep, though, you wouldn't hear the sound. At some point in the ocean, you wouldn't hear the sound at all.
It's hydroacoustics, which means that the sound travels through the water.
It's not audible. You're saying in essence.
That's right. I mean, well, it is audible, but it's odd. So whales use hydroacoustics
to find each other.
Porpoises. They use little chirps and bleeps, and these things travel for miles and miles and miles. So this is similar to that.
Okay, so let's get into why did the flight disappear and what precipitated the flight seemingly disappearing into thin air. What the Malaysian government's role is in the whole thing, which is a whole nother. I want to mention one thing really quick before we get into this. I know you got some great stuff. Just by way of context, so the 777, the Boeing airplane, the jet liner, was subjected to the most intense stress testing of any plane in the history of Boeing to that point in production. 1995.
Did they check the door bolts?
Yeah, right. They in 1995 they subjected it to 150% of the expected stress testing, structural sound, and
well-built plane.
The most well-built commercial airliner.
This is the Lexus of Boeing planes.
Yes, someone might argue an American-made car company if they were listening. But anyway, you were saying I'm from Detroit. I couldn't help myself. Sorry.
So I kind of want to go through a quick timeline, and while we're talking,
I'm going to be interrupting because there's problems with these timelines.
Right.
There's problems with. I'm kidding you.
But the basic timeline is that the plane takes off from Kuala Lumpur, the capital of Malaysia, at 42 minutes after so this is midnight. This is 42 minutes into the new day, and it's
a red eye.
It's a red eye flight.
Sure.
And it's flying to China. I think the flight is supposed to last 6 hours.
That's right.
Roughly. The final voice contact with the plane happens at 1:19. So, you're looking at about 38 minutes difference, right?
Yep.
Then at 1:21, the transponder goes silent. Now, some people say that this had to be manually disabled, that the transponder...
Who says that it doesn't have to be manually disabled? You're saying some people say, everybody says it has to be manually disabled.
Well, if we consider the explosion of the plane as manual disablement, then yes, then it would have to be.
But the plane didn't explode at that point.
We don't know.
Well, we kind of do because it was still on military radar. Yeah, we kind of do know.
Well, we know that military radar found something.
Military radar tracked the plane for over an hour, or approximately an hour after the transponder was shut off. Wait, that's a critical element.
Okay, but the transponder goes silent. That's all we know.
Okay, and why does it go silent?
We don't know.
Okay, I do, because the pilot shut it off.
Oh, okay,
but go ahead.
Okay, so at 2:22, all radar contact.
2:22 a.m. Gotcha.
2:22 a.m. All radar contact is lost at that point. Now, some specialized satellite communications with the plane apparently still persist. There's a company out of London called Inmarsat, and Inmarsat runs a series of satellites that communicates with airplanes, but it's a very vague communication. And so the signals the satellites send out, emanate in kind of oval patterns, and
not precise.
They cannot tell where
Yeah.
the plane is in that ellipsis, but they know that it's in that basic area. And Inmarsat apparently has data that suggests that they've got contact or pings back for some hours. They don't know right where the location is, but they're getting pings back for some time after the
transponder's turned off.
After all radar contact is lost. So at 2:22.
And then all radar, yep.
Yeah. So that's what we know. What do you know?
Well, listen, there's a big problem because there's a whole host of reasons that to me this is really not that complicated. All the conspiracy. Nobody's a bigger conspiracy theorist in the universe than me. Let me start with that. And
It's true.
And I'm pretty convinced that there is no conspiracy here. That it was the pilot. And here's why I think it was the pilot. There is too many series of events where there was an opportunity for the pilot to do something that he did nothing. Let's start with number one.
Well, when you say pilot,
yeah, the pilot and the co-pilot, they're in cahoots.
Okay. They're in cahoots. You think they're in cahoots? Okay.
Well, they had to be in cahoots. They had to be, unless the pilot took the co-pilot out.
Yeah, I mean, some have speculated that the co-pilot was actually flying the aircraft. That's known. He was on his last full flight mission flight before he was to qualify to be a captain himself. So the captain of the plane is the guy who
It's an odd thing to know. How would they know that?
Well, the airline told us this.
Okay. The airline? Who's trusting the airline?
Well, no, but the airline knows about its employees. I mean, they're in the best position to know that.
That may have been the idea. Obviously, nobody knows who was flying the plane because the two guys are gone. So we don't know who was flying the plane. But you're saying before the flight started, the idea, the concept had been introduced.
The co-pilot was scheduled to be the pilot of the plane, and the very experienced captain of the plane was acting as the communications officer
to give this younger pilot an opportunity to fly.
To fly, have his own flight, and he was there just in case something strange happened. Then he'd step in.
Okay,
as a very seasoned, very experienced.
So back to I don't know if that has any bearing or not, but back to my original point is I'm assuming. And this is a big assumption, that there's only one of two things. Either the two pilots were acting together or the pilot took the co-pilot out at some point in time. How he did so, we'll never know. Now, the big question is, forget later on in the thing when he turns off the transponders, why would a pilot? Well, listen, pilots have really a whole bunch of critical things to do. One of them is to remain on radar. It is one of the fundamental critical elements of flying a commercial airline is to be tracked by air traffic control and understand there's other planes in the air. You don't turn your radar off, your transponder signal, unless there's something going on, unbecoming. But before that, the big critical moment in this whole mystery really is simple. The jet has on a course. The flight I got a commercially documentable course. It's going from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. That's a line on a map. It flies generally northeast for 38 minutes and then turns hard left and starts flying west. Mm-hmm. Unexplainably. No distress signals, nothing from the pilot. It's the middle of the night. Come on.
But then the Malaysian military radar that you just spoke about a moment ago, then finds that after it takes the hard left that you're talking about and heads west, that it then heads northwest.
But still, it's flying completely off course. And then it turns off. The pilot is the one that turns off the transponder. The pilot's the one that turns the plane. Wait a minute. Cockpit door reinforced. No distress calls from the cockpit. I mean, listen, he's in charge of the plane. He or they are in charge of the plane. The plane does certain things, a series of events leading up, precipitating to the plane disappearing. And it's all at the expense and at the protocol of the pilot and the pilot's behavior. I don't know how you attribute it to anybody else. By the way, there was, interestingly enough, quickly, a really fascinating footnote. There was 2 Iranian nationals traveling on stolen passports. Do you know about this?
I did.
And the Malaysian government oddly cleared them. Imagine for a minute the profiling that went on that passenger.
Right.
The passengers in the plane.
Yeah.
They sussed through every single passenger, figured out who, and I'm sure 95% of them were out, and then the other 3 or 4% were out, and you get down to a handful of people, and pretty soon they're like, there's nobody on this plane. This is a huge moment. There's nobody on this plane that fits the profile that would do this evil.
Well, so apparently these 2 Iranians were seeking asylum in China.
How convenient.
Yeah, that was an interesting
Say the
turn of events.
conspiracists.
But you know what else? There was a cargo manifest where 2.5 tons of electronics labeled Motorola electronic equipment did not go through.
Wait, it sure wasn't Bugs Bunny and Wile E. Coyote? It didn't say
was-
Acme Radios?
It says Acme.
Did it say Acme Radios?
Acme
Okay.
Radios.
Motorola. Are you kidding me?
Exactly
That's
the point.
too convenient.
It gets loaded into the cargo hold, but it never passed through security screening.
And your contention is that this information...
I don't know what it is. It's not my contention. Other people have said this. I'm just bringing this up.
What are other people contending that was in this Motorola crate, stamped Motorola?
So there's a French journalist who wrote a book, 2021, and she's contending that crate contained very sensitive guidance electronics.
What is she basing that on? Where does she get that information?
So her sources come out of the Pentagon. And she's claiming that the box contained stolen guidance electronics that the Chinese were trying to get a hold of, so that they could learn how our new guidance systems, missile guidance systems. I think it may be the hypersonic missile guidance system works, and maybe reverse engineered or whatever.
Okay, let's assume that the Motorola crate is a viable theory. I'm not buying it. I'm not sure if you are or not, but extrapolate forward. So now what happens? Why did they take the plane out in the fashion they did? Because there's 2 crates of Motorola.
In her book, she goes through all of the possible scenarios and dismisses the rogue pilot theory, which is the one you're espousing. But there are like 12 other or 13 other theories.
There could be 113 theories.
That's right, but prominent theories. And she tries to debunk each one of those. And the only thing that ends up making sense is this, the U.S. government blows up the plane when it crosses over into the Vietnamese airspace, because there's a gap of time when a plane signs off from its home air traffic control system and then gets reconnected to the new nation.
So they blow the plane out of the sky and nobody notices? Nobody else picks it? No other world, no other monitoring?
Apparently, according to this theory...
Do you believe they blew the plane out of the sky? What do you think?
I think it's possible. I don't know. I don't know if
Anything's
I believe
possible, but what do you think?
I think it's possible. That's what I'm going to say. Do I think it's extremely possible? Probably not. But I think there's some, I'm not saying 5% possibility. I'm saying that maybe this is a 20% possible.
I'm not asking this. I'm not trying to be. It's a serious question. But would the plane have been blown out of the air before or after the hard left turn? This is a big question because
no, it would have been much farther. This is when it's no longer.
So why was it on the way to Beijing and then gets to? You think somebody redirected the plane?
Yes. Well, according to this theory,
help me.
An AWAC is known to be in that area, and an AWAC is a U.S. Air Force plane that has among its many different radar tracking capabilities, jamming technologies. And so it would jam all signals from the plane for a certain period of time, and it would then communicate with the airplane privately, have a private communication, and they instructed them to start heading out to taking that hard left and heading west. Then it gets to a point where it's no longer obeying commands for whatever reason, we don't know. And it could even be electronics failure between the two. And somebody makes the call at the Pentagon to take it out rather than have that box of electronics actually make its way to Beijing.
So do we have any proof? Does the author have any proof?
The author has accounts
about the AWAC. Did anyone track the AWAC?
Yes.
Was the AWAC undeniably in the space?
According to this author, yes. In fact, her name, let me get it here so that we're working all with the same. Her name is Florence de Changy. She is a French journalist.
Okay, and so her contention is that this AWAC, it's documentable.
Changy.
This AWAC, people have found this AWAC.
Yes, not only that, there are accounts. This is a very heavily used shipping lane in that area. So there are several accounts from boats in the water about where the explosion would have happened if it were taken out by missile that talk about seeing a big bright orange ball in the sky.
You'd see it for miles and miles.
And this is what.
Of course, if it was what
this is this is a fishing trawler.
But what would the altitude have been?
I don't know what the altitude was at that time.
Yeah,
I don't know anybody does at that point.
No, I'm saying, what would the altitude of that plane?
Maybe 30,000 feet.
I was going to say 10 to 20,000
feet. It'd be above
20,
weather.
Yeah. Way more than 20 something. Right.
Sorry.
My point is, I'm saying I don't know if you see a flash.
I think a cargo vessel, a cargo ship saw it. A fishing trawler or fishing vessel saw it. So several vessels saw a big bright orange.
This French journalist interviewed these people, and they.
I don't know if she interviewed them. I don't know how she got that information.
Right? Like, do we have?
I've not read her book. I've not read her book.
But I'm curious if there are eyewitness accounts beyond, because let me explain away quickly the AWAC in the air. That's a volatile part of the world, and AWACs are flying around there all the time, monitoring what's going on.
Yeah, makes sense.
So the fact that there's an AWAC in proximity to this plane that disappears later is irrelevant.
Yeah,
it's literally irrelevant.
But what's interesting is
that?
Yes. But what's interesting is
do you agree with
it does.
Wait, do you agree with it?
I agree with what?
The fact that there's an AWAC in proximity to this plane that ends up missing is irrelevant. That there's an AWAC in the air near that.
Well, no, it's not irrelevant. It would be irrelevant.
There's AWACs all over the place in the volatile parts of the world.
But they're not everywhere.
Well, I mean, dozens of places.
They have to be in close enough proximity to a location to actually jam, right? They can't jam infinity.
Across the globe,
yeah,
sure.
They can only jam in a certain
But I'm just saying
space.
The fact that an AWAC was there, and to attribute that to this plane, it could be sheer coincidence.
It could be sheer coincidence.
It feels coincidental.
I will absolutely agree with you on that.
Thank you.
It could be coincidence. That's true. But the handoff into Vietnam allowed for this 15-minute gap or so before the Vietnamese air traffic control comes back and contacts Malaysia and says, "Hey, look, MH370 is no longer has not entered our airspace. Where is it? Is it late, delayed? We need to have an update." And that's apparently where the first indication of something having gone wrong happens. And so Malaysia now is put on notice that plane.
What you're speaking of is, if I'm not mistaken, is that there at 1:30 in the morning, based on this timeline we've already established, the 12, leaving it shortly after midnight and flying at 1:30 in the morning, give or take, a Vietnamese pilot attempts to contact on a plane-to-plane communication system the jet MH370, and in fact makes contact and says that all he heard was, quote, mumbling and static. So he attempts to call the plane from plane to plane and says, "Hey, what's going on?" Or, because I think the Vietnamese tower had been, air traffic was saying, "Hey, Vietnamese pilot, there's another pilot up there. We can't make any contact with him. Can you see him? Can you find him?"
They actually call back to the Malaysian traffic control system.
So do you know what I'm referencing?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just saying. So the fact that this Vietnamese pilot on his own, it says that he contacted this MH370 and that he heard mumbling. The person picked up the phone, so to speak, the receiver, the pilot, presumably, or whoever was piloting the plane, 370, and they heard, quote, mumbling and static. So the plane at 1:30 in the morning is still flying.
Yeah.
according to this Vietnamese, he called directly to this plane. He wasn't in question whether or not he contacted the right plane, whether or not the guy picked up. Those were not. Sorry. So here's where we've got a lot to wrap up. But one of the things that was really important is if you think about this. So first he turns off the transponder. Okay. Then he takes his hard left. Okay. Okay. And so the question right now, before we get any farther in this quickly is, do we agree or disagree, or do we not know why he turned off the transponder? And why he took the hard left? Is it hijacking? Is it under the plane under someone else's control? What is the basis for that?
There are a couple things, right?
Those are two glaring problems.
My biggest problem with the rogue pilot theory, and either maybe you have an explanation for this, but my biggest problem with it is
I don't. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
If the captain wanted to commit suicide, wanted to destroy this plane, didn't like somebody on the plane, so forth, why did he bother flying it for 6 more hours? Why didn't he, as soon as he got into the ocean, as soon as he got into the Vietnamese airspace, why didn't he just ditch it into the ground?
I do have an answer. Simple answers. One, he's a coward. And he wanted to go the same fashion, have the thing slowly descend and then crash, as opposed to this kamikaze moment of impacty thing. He went to sleep. He turned the thing on autopilot, pointed out over the ocean.
So you think he was dead before it crashed?
I know. I think he was killed in the crash, but
the plane was presumably brought up above 40,000 feet, right at its fuselage limit, and presumably.
How do we know that?
This is some of the radar information that's tracking this plane, that the military aircraft.
So you're saying when it was still on radar, it was at 40,000 feet?
It went up to 40,000 feet. It was not at 40,000 feet when it took off. I mean, eventually, after it made that hard left, after they hit that Vietnamese airspace and makes the hard left, it goes up to 40,000 feet. And some are theorizing that way you're going to cause everybody to have oxygen deprivation, and they would collapse. And
he shut the oxygen off. So anyway, quickly, the 2 points.
Well, it wasn't that he shut the oxygen off. They just wouldn't have enough. Those airbags that come down only will give you oxygen for 15 minutes or so. So they would just run out of oxygen. So
that's not very long. So, but my point is whether or not it was the cowardly act of committing a mass suicide, if that's a term, committing suicide and causing this catastrophe. The other reason that he did what he did, and this is why this is so insidious, he intentionally set out to cause this incredible mystery.
Why?
Well, we don't know why people do what they do, but you understand that we
can't really say that they did it.
But there's too many deliberate details involved in the plane flying out into what is the deepest part of the Indian Ocean, where it would be almost impossible to recover. So we're running out of time. There is one quick addendum that because of this incident, there's been a host of improvements. The black boxes now have longer batteries. The radio communications have been improved. The satellite and the radar functions have all been extended and improved because of this mystery.
So some good has come out of it.
Well, at the expense of, we should do another podcast on the Malaysian government involvement, the airlines involvement, Boeing.
235 people, I think, 239, 150 Chinese, 227 passengers, 150 Chinese, 12 crew.
May God
including
rest
the
their
two
soul.
pilots.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Heartbreaking for those families to this day.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Jeff. We'll see you next time, buddy.
Thank you.
Thanks.